What's up, everybody? www.benteachersenglishOverseas.com. I hope that you're doing great. Today's topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart. It gets me a little bit emotional. I'm hoping that I can convey this message in such a way that you're able to take it on board and truly understand what I mean, what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with a statistic for this video. In 2013 to 2014, the number of children and youth ages 3 to 21 receiving special education services was 6.5 million. Or about 13% of all public school students. 13%, guys. Keep that number in mind. That's in the United States of America, a very developed country. A lot of teachers go overseas and they forget the fact that a lot of countries have almost no knowledge of disabilities. They have no awareness, no education systems in place. And this is not to get on a high horse and say that America is so advanced, because we are not. I remember when I was a kid, the children who had disabilities, it was like, oh no, get them out of here, put them in their own room, separate them, segregate them. Fortunately, a lot's been done now that they're able to integrate into classrooms to a certain extent and learn alongside their non-disabled peers, which I think is very important. Because that's how life is. When you have a challenge, you can't just cut it out. You have to face it head on and you have to do something with it, right? So disabled students are a very disadvantaged group in many, many countries overseas, especially developing countries with no knowledge of how to properly educate these children, young adults, and even grown adults. Many of them may not even realize that they have a disability, okay? So I'll tell you a couple stories. First, I remember I was teaching in China. I had a pretty big class, and the first day is always crucial. You want to set the tone, you want to get everything moving in the right way, you want them to know your rules, you want them to know that you mean business and that their education is important to you, right? I had a student stand up while I was calling roll and run up to the podium. And he was mocking me and like screaming. Now, a lot of teachers would have just blown up, gone crazy, right? The kid had autism, clearly had autism. All of the indications were made readily apparent over the next few weeks that I taught with him. But he had never been diagnosed. And the other deal is, it's a school for people with money, right? So you got these parents who probably have a lot of money, and if you sat them down and said, your child has autism, or this is a disability faced by your child, they would not want to hear it, or they would flat out refuse it because it's some kind of a shameful thing to them, right? No, that's not in our family, not this child, no. We have money, we can throw money at the problem or whatever. Right? So I ended up working with this kid, and instead of turning my back on him, I kind of took him under my wing, so to speak. It was very difficult. It was not fun for me, but in the end I ended up being his favorite teacher, and it was a very rewarding experience overall. But trying to get some kind of a long-term game plan without a support network is difficult, and it's a problem that you're going to run into. So I would advise anybody who's been in this situation or is going to be in this situation in the future, take this into consideration. Don't think that this kid is just trying to disrespect you, right? He was getting a laugh. All the students were chuckling like it was the most hilarious thing. We're in a brand new class. He's disrespecting the teacher. Ho, ho, ho. It's so funny. They didn't stop to think. This kid had serious issues, right? So another issue that I've had, I was in Africa and we were going around the room doing a bit of group work, and it comes time for one student to speak. He doesn't say anything. He just puts his head down. And I had two choices. I've seen teachers freak out in situations like this. Oh, he's disrespecting me. Oh, he won't talk. Blah, blah, blah. And they freak out because they're prima donnas. Okay? Me, I just said, you know what, skip him, but stay after class, I want to talk to you, right? Well, once the guy stayed after class and talked to him, he had a horrible speech impediment. He could not stop stuttering. And the more nervous he was, the worse it got. And he had been laughed at, ridiculed, made fun of his whole life in school. He'd been bullied for it. Okay? So how do you think it's going to make him feel if a teacher then picks on him too? It's going to feel like he has nobody on his side, nobody in his corner, right? So be very aware of these kinds of things. They won't always be so apparent, and it can be very easy to get upset about or think that the kid's just being lazy, but more often than not, there's a deeper cause. Okay? So I've worked in places before, like in Africa, where I've had students who come to class, they haven't had clean water in 3 days. They have to walk 1.5 miles with a bucket to get water and bring it back. They don't have heat in their house. They don't have electricity in their house. They gave their money to a family member who was sick and needed medicine. Okay? Just the fact that this guy or this girl is coming to my class to learn English when so many things around them are terrible, it means a lot to me. It really does. And I have to keep that in mind all the time. So there might be some teachers, oh, this guy smells, or this guy, yeah, he's going out of his way, busting his ass, trying to better himself. And you're going to ridicule him for it. Don't do it, right? And I'm not saying that you, the viewer, is going to, but you will see this in your time teaching overseas. You will see it. There are a lot of people who just totally overlook the daily struggles that a lot of students go through. So let's continue on. We've talked about undiagnosed autism, undiagnosed learning disabilities, the shame involved, and how a lot of times they just want to quarantine students with disabilities. How about this? Have you ever thought about this? Remember my video, if you haven't seen it before, about your foreign language skill not being an asset, not being a good thing? Okay. Many times you're going to get to your classroom and your textbooks are going to be totally in English, and your class is going to be totally in English because you most likely don't speak the the local language, and if you do, you should keep it to yourself because they want a totally immersion environment. Think about how hard it is to learn a foreign language in a foreign language. Go look at any of your Spanish textbooks from your typical public high school or your French textbook. All the instructions are in English. A lot of the stuff is in English. And then your teacher probably taught you using a little bit of English. So when you go in, it's so important that you use hand gestures, you teach vocabulary, you go over it again and again, and you're just very patient and you understand the fact that they are being put in a very difficult situation. Now, many will rise to the occasion and you'll be shocked at how quickly they learn, but it is a very difficult feat. So let's talk about a few other things. What can we do? When we go into a classroom, we find out that we have students with disabilities. Maybe this student has no plan, no history, nobody has taken any action. There are 3 basic things that I would advise that you can do, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. These are going to be different for every student that you encounter. Okay? The first is to make accommodations. Now, what is an accommodation? This means if you have a student who has a listening disability, when you have an audio program playing or you have a test in which a cassette or a CD or digital audio is part of it, move that student closer to the speaker. Rearrange the seating so that you can accommodate that disability. If you have a student who needs glasses and doesn't have glasses, yes, you'll see this all the time. the student doesn't have money, the parents don't have the money to send him to the eye doctor to get glasses, or the parents just want to stick him in a private school and not deal with him because he has multiple disabilities and it's easier to do that, so somebody else has to watch him. If you have somebody with a vision that's vision impaired, has a disability like this, move them closer to the board. You can also print their exam with larger type. I've done before. If you're usually printing in like 12 or 14 size font, give it to this guy in size 22 or something. Or call him up and be like, after class, don't do it in front of the class, but be like, hey, can you read this okay? Because you're not testing his ability to read small font. You're testing his English ability. So accommodate that, help him out, and be aware that a lot of these kids are not going to tell you. They've been ridiculed, they've been bullied, and so they hide this stuff and they don't want to put it out there. But you'll see signs if you're paying attention, and I highly recommend that for your smaller classes. I know this is a challenge if you have a university with, sometimes I was teaching 400 plus students, but if you have smaller classes, keep a log on their progress, things you notice, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in, okay? So 1 out of 3, I said accommodation. You can accommodate those students. Next is differentiation. Differentiation basically means that everybody has the same objectives, but they are allowed to meet those objectives in different ways. So you might have students that learn and demonstrate the knowledge that they've gained best by writing a paper. You may have students who do better by writing a speech that they give to the class, or whatever. You can offer a broad range of topics and a bunch of different options for students, and they know what they're good at. And you will notice the excitement level go through the roof when you don't tell them exactly how they have to accomplish the task. Alright guys, here's the objective, here's the task, here are the different options available to you depending on your style. Everybody learns in a different way. Some people read, some people listen, some people need to touch things, they have to do it once, twice, 3 times before it really clicks for them. Okay? And finally, last but not least, is modification. So modification basically means that the students are not held to the same standard as their non-disabled peers. And basically, for example, Sean Banville's Breaking News English, I've told you guys about that site a number of times. It's great because there's the regular story with the regular vocabulary, and then you also have a different version that is much easier. For some students that need a modification because of a difference in level or a difference in whatever, I will give them the easier version of those. Some students will get 10 vocabulary words, but others want to be really pushed and need 30 to 40. Okay. So everybody will have different objectives. And this can vary based on where you're teaching and what the school's expectations are of you and what you need to deliver. But I found that when these situations have presented themselves and I've talked with the administration or whoever, they've been very receptive to what I wanted to do and the best way that I saw to go forward helping students reach their potential. So that's how I feel about this topic. Be an advocate for your students. Be somebody's hero. Listen to them when somebody else won't. Find out how they can best reach their goals and implement these 3: accommodation, differentiation, modification. Remember, everybody's going through a struggle, and we've just touched on a few topics. There's a lot that goes on outside the classroom and in kids' homes and everywhere else that you don't know about. So be aware, and that's it for this time. I hope you guys are doing great. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you later.